I would now like to introduce today's presenters. David Rickard is a partner at Everest Group, leading the global customer experience management services and trust and safety and marketing services. Abhijnan Dasgupta is a practice director on the business process services team and manages Everest Group's trust and safety outsourcing offerings. Dhruv Khosla is a senior analyst with Everest Group and is a subject matter expert on trust and safety outsourcing offerings. And with that, I would like to turn things over to David.
Thank you very much. And yeah, welcome to this webinar, wherever you're listening from. What we wanted to talk about today is just trying to give a perspective on the changing landscape of trust and safety. We know it's a really important area for many organizations, and it's undergoing a lot of change based on regulations, based on the impact of technology. So what we're going to be talking about today is three areas. One, which is some of the key enterprise focus areas and trends that we're seeing in trust and safety. We'll then look at regulations affecting enterprises and the things that have to be considered. And then we'll look at how technology is going to affect trust and safety in the next 2 to 3 years. Because as we often joke, but you can't do any webinar without mentioning Gen AI. I'm sure that will come up, but I'm just getting it in early. So we will be touching on generative AI as well. As Philippan said, if you've got any questions, please use the Q&A tab, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can for you. If we don't get them answered today, we will come back and answer them offline. So please feel free to put in any questions. So first of all, just to orientate the team, when we're talking about trust and safety from an Everest Group perspective, this is how we see the process map. So we look at trust and safety across a number of areas. So content creation, annotation, and data analysis, review and compliance. So a lot of the moderation activities sit within there. But we also cover platform safety, ad review and compliance, and content services. And then we have a number of horizontal trust and safety services, whether that's AI support services or policy and regulatory support. So just orientating people, because some people, when they hear trust and safety, think only of content moderation. Some people think of the broader context. So I wanted to just set the scene as we think about trust and safety from an Everest Group perspective. This is how we see the world. So we wanted to start with a poll. So I would really appreciate you indulging me in this and responding once we bring the poll up. But in 2022, we saw the enterprise spend in trust and safety grow by more than 20%. What we're interested in is just get a perspective, and then we'll actually give you an answer and some insights into this afterwards. But what do you think happened in 2023? Do you think it declined? Do you think it remained flat in 2023? Do you think it increased marginally, so 6 to 10%? Or do you think it increased significantly? And that may be because you're on the service provider side and you're selling and delivering these services, or maybe you're on the buyer side and you're aligning to what you did from a spend perspective. So I'll leave the poll open for a little bit longer, but I would say, please, it gives us really rich insights into what the market are feeling when we get answers to these type of questions. So we've got about 40-50% of people have participated. I would sort of encourage you to respond. Interestingly, what we're seeing is that currently people are saying it either remain flat or increase significantly. So actually, let's look at the answers. So what we've seen is that 44% of you said it remained flat, but 38% of you said it increased significantly by more than 10%. And then 19% said it increased marginally. Interestingly, nobody said it declined. So that's probably what we would have expected, but it's an interesting perspective just to get. So thank you for those who have indulged us in the poll. We will have one more poll later, so please be prepared to give us your answers there. But Abby, maybe moving on to you to give us a view as to what did the market actually do and where do we think it's going?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, David. Hello, everyone, wherever you are joining in from. Yeah, very interested to see that a lot of people actually, voted in favor of that. It has increased significantly, right? And we all know about the recessionary environment, although technically may not be a recession that different parts of the world had faced. But it's good to see that a lot of people have faith that enterprises, obviously, they take trust and safety services very seriously and probably would have increased the spend significantly in 2023, right? However, just going on to what actually happened. So, all those who answered that it increased, marginally, probably near about in the right, I would say range, because yeah, it increased roughly by around 8%. The enterprise spend on outsourcing trust and safety increased by roughly 8% in 2023, right? And we don't expect trust and safety to see the kind of growth that it had seen in the yesteryears, where there was more than 20% growth. In fact, even in some years there was more than 40% growth, right? And the reasons for that is that we expect the recovery to be slow in US and Europe, right? Also the fact that a lot of the social media companies, they are increasing the offshoring as much as possible. And they're also putting in other cutting measures, right, wherever possible. For example, the increased reliance on automation. So yeah, so we expect the fact that the trust and safety spending, which has stabilized in the last 2 or 3 years, that stabilization to continue. However, having said that, the good news is that there's still going to be an overall increase in trust and safety spend in the next few years. And the reasons for that, one of them is obviously generative AI, which we expect to have a net positive effect on the trust and safety spend, as whatever content surge there will be. I mean, the volume of content increasing due to generative AI, we do not believe that that will be completely offset by generative AI's automation capabilities, right? Leading to a net increase in trust and safety spend. However, beyond that, if you look at some of these geopolitical events, whether it's in terms of the elections this year or some of the conflicts that are going on in the world, we expect that they will also drive a surge in the demand for trust and safety services, right? At least in the short term, if not in the very long term. And on top of all of that, now you have the regulations which have come into effect, whether it's the DSA, DMA, or the OSA. Now you have Singapore also coming up with their, regulations regarding trust and safety. And then on top of that, we also expect the AI Act to be effective early next year. So which means that with all these regulations, there will be increased focus on getting the accuracy of moderation right. So which means that there will be increased, we expect that the enterprises will be increasing their spend on trust and safety, and service providers will play a critical role in ensuring robust moderation practices. So that's our outlook for the market, in the next few years. So we expect it to grow, obviously not at the kind of growth that we have seen in the past, but nonetheless driven by generative AI, the regulatory obligations, and the geopolitical events. There will be a net increase in the trust and safety spend.
Thanks, Abby. Yeah, I think just pausing very quickly now, I think that's one of the reasons why you and I make quite a good team, because I'm just picking up on something that you said in there, which is you're very much from a service provider perspective, or historically have been, and you said it's good news that spend is going up. I come from an enterprise buyer background, and spend going up is not good news from my perspective. So actually, by bringing those two perspectives together here at Eris Group, I think we do try and present quite a balanced view. But from an enterprise perspective, you never want your spend to go up. From a service provider's perspective, you obviously do. So yeah, I was just quite interested in that perspective. So if
I mean, so David, before we move on to this, I think there's something that I should clarify, right? So when I said good news, it was due to the fact that content is still growing very rapidly, right? But we don't expect the enterprise spend to keep pace with the growth in the content, right? So for example, if the content is growing at 50%, we don't expect the enterprise spend to increase by 50%, right? So a lot of that will probably be taken care of automation. So yeah, I mean, probably, like you mentioned, that it's not really a good news from the enterprise perspective, but the mitigating factor is that, yeah, it's not going to increase as much as the content is growing because of the automation there. Yeah.
Okay, I think you're covering this slide for us as well, so go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So while we looked at the growth of the market at an overall basis, a quick word on the growth that we see in different geographies. Yeah, North America continues to be the largest share of trust and safety spend, and this is going to continue in the future. However, we do not expect the market to grow as fast as it had done in the past in North America. We expect that the growth will be driven mostly by Asia Pacific and to some extent by Europe. Asia Pacific due to the demographic factors, booming tech ecosystem, the infrastructure is also improving, and Europe due to the regulations that have come into being, most noticeably the regulations in EU and UK, which means that, like I mentioned, there will be an increased focus on accuracy and speed of moderation. So that is going to drive some of the increase in spend over there. So yeah, that's take on the geographies. If you look at the growth by industry, again, social media always has traditionally been the largest spender in in trust and safety, and they will continue to be the largest spender. So in fact, some of the content that we see, right, in terms of the type of harm, a lot of that have their beginnings in social media, and probably that is going to continue. But what we see in terms of growth is that there are certain industries which are seeing increasing demand for trust and safety because of the new use cases that are coming up, right? So for example, fintech, search engines, LLMs, and e-commerce. We're seeing a lot of new use cases coming up, and we expect that these industries will grow much faster. And so yeah, I mean, if you look at it in terms of the spend, social media will continue to be the largest spender, but you would have a lot of significant spend coming from some of these other industries also in the years to come, right? So while we are looking at all the factors, which we can contribute to which we believe will contribute to the increase in spend of trust and safety, we also want to have a look at the trends, right, which typically affect trust and safety. And also there may be some new trends that can affect trust and safety this time going forward, right? So I'll hand it over to David probably to have us through some of those trends.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. And I think we won't spend long on the trends that we see as evergreen. So the things that have obviously been important for a while now and aren't going away. Those you've got obviously increasing content volume and the variety, and you've touched on that. But all new sorts of content being generated and created. Moderator well-being is still going to be crucial in this space. Actually, with some of the things I'm finding quite interesting is that actually a lot of the moderator well-being programs are actually being rolled out broadly across contact centers now, not just in trust and safety programs. I think that's good from a contact center environment perspective, but moderator well-being is going to continue to be important to drive that employee experience up. We know the changing demographics, so the way people interact with technology and social media channels and being able to generate their own content is changing as those demographics are changing. The acceptance of humans using AI and working together, both from a delivering of service is there, but actually how humans are receptive to working with AI is changing as well. So these things are going to be consistent, as well as a real dynamic regulatory landscape that we have. So that's interesting as well in terms of as we start thinking about regulations. I think someone's playing with a slide, so if we could stop moving the slides around, it would be really helpful. But yeah, if we think about the regulatory situation, then actually we're seeing that moving around, and we will get more into the dynamic regulatory landscape. So that's actually where we'll be talking a little bit as well, because we know the concerns from enterprises we speak about using Gen AI actually as well is where are we actually going in terms of the regulation. So as we think about that, we'll now look at maybe some of the more up and coming trends when we move on to Dhruv, who's going to cover that.
Thanks, David, for covering some of the evergreen trends. And what I'm going to do over the next couple of slides, and I'll talk about each of these in detail as I move forward. What I'll be covering are some of the more recent trends that we've been witnessing. Let me actually just move to the correct slide. And yeah, that's where we have started. Yeah. So these are some of the more recent trends that we've been witnessing over the past few months. And these are those trends that we anticipate to continue over the coming few months as well. And we'll talk about each of these as we move ahead. So just before I get started, I'll just give you an overview of some of these trends, right? So firstly, what we are seeing, and I think we talked about it in our poll as well, that we're witnessing that enterprise spend on trust and safety, the outsourcing spend is starting to stabilize. So while the rate of growth rate was quite high a couple of years ago, it has started to stabilize now in more recent years, and we anticipate it to continue at that particular range going forward. Increasingly, what we are also witnessing is a cross linkage between geopolitical events that are out there and the volume of content that needs to get moderated. So whenever there's a geopolitical event, and this is more of a global factor rather than any focused on any particular geography. So whenever there's a geopolitical event out there in any particular geography, any region, any country, we see that the volume of content that needs to get moderated increases. Gen AI, I think, is the buzzword, and obviously, as in any other service area, we feel that generative AI will also have implications in trust and safety. And here, I think one of the key things that we need to keep in mind is the fact that generative AI has two implications in trust and safety. One of the content creation engine in itself, and second, that it brings with itself a moderation capability. So we have two effects that we have foresee with generative AI playing in trust and safety. Increasingly, what else we are seeing is that there's an increased focus on adoption of responsible as well as ethical AI principles. We've seen leaders at leading organization and enterprises come forward and talk about, with increased adoption of AI, how we need to also focus on ensuring that there's a responsible and ethical uptake. Lastly, I think you mentioned about regulations on the last slide. And what we feel is that while the dynamic regulatory landscape continues, one thing that we need to keep in mind is that irrespective of the dynamic regulations, the pressure to comply with these regulations continues to mount. And these regulations are now not only restricted to trust and safety regulations, but also take into account the AI regulations. So yeah, these are some of the strengths, and I'll deep dive into each of these as we move forward. Right. Yeah. So I think we did a poll a while back, and all of you were in agreeing with us that we're witnessing a marginal increase in trust and safety spend. A couple of years ago, around COVID, this rate of growth of trust and safety outsourcing spend was in high 30s and late 40s, right? So this sort of a growth rate was there. Having said that, now we're anticipating this growth rate to land somewhere in the high single digits or low double digits. However, one thing that continues, and David referred to it, is as one of the evergreen trends, right? The volume of content that needs to get moderated is still rising. And we can see that across the transparency report of any of the leading enterprises. We can open the transparency report and we see that, the type of content that they are moderating, be it text, be it image, be it audio, right? Everything is still increasing. Having said that, the spend that they are doing on outsourcing is starting to stabilize. Now, the factors that are contributing to such spend stabilization are multiple, right? Firstly, if we look at the global macroeconomic situation, we see that the enterprises are going through budgetary and cost pressures because of such macroeconomic situations. The revenue of such enterprises did not grow as we had anticipated a couple of years ago. And obviously, added to it is the geopolitical uncertainty that does impact their revenue. So we've seen that enterprises are also now smartly optimizing their trust and safety spend rather than the sort of growth rate that we were seeing a couple of years ago. Additionally, I think we've seen that enterprises, especially the big tech, continue to invest in their automated engines, and the accuracy of such automated engines is started to increase. So some of that investment has started to bear results and in one of cases, we've also heard about cannibalization of human moderation due to increase in accuracy of such automation engine. Lastly, I think linked to the budgetary pressure is the fact that along with cost pressures, enterprises are increasingly preferring offshore locations. Now, that could be to do with the fact that the accuracy of translation engines has gone up. Multilingual speakers are available, especially for the more common languages. So all of these factors combined, we believe, have sort of helped in stabilizing the trust and safety outsourcing spend over the years. Having talked about the outsourcing spend and volume of content to be moderated, now let's discuss about the content complexity and how it correlates to geopolitical events. So what we've done on this particular slide, as you can see, we've listed down certain geopolitical events, and we've tried to classify how with each geopolitical event, there's a surge in toxic content on different platforms. Bad actors have continuously relied upon social media platforms, digital platforms, right, to manipulate users, to indulge in hate speech, spread misinformation, or push a particular narrative. We've seen how bad actors have often called for real world violence as well. And as I said, this is a global phenomena. This isn't restricted to any particular geography. If I were to talk about any recent example, we see this year to be the election year, considering there are 50 to 60 elections within this year itself. Last year, when there were elections in Bangladesh, we saw deep fake videos coming out. We saw an audio clone of the president of US in the New Hampshire election. So what we are seeing is that while the spend is starting to stabilize, the complexity of moderation, especially that linked with geopolitical events, is still rising. Moving to the impact of generative AI. So as you guys can see, what we've done is that we've broken down the impact of generative AI on how we anticipate its impact to be on the type of services that the enterprises will require. So in case anybody of you is joining us late, I'll repeat. Generative AI, unlike mostly of the other areas, plays two roles in trust and safety. One, it helps with increase in content volume, and secondly, it also plays the role of a moderation engine in itself. So how we anticipate the impact of generative AI on trust and safety is that we believe that the pace of human content moderation is going to subside, and that of value added services is going to grow faster. When I'm referring to value added services, the type of services that I want to refer to are training data provision, data annotation, risk governance, prompt engineering. All these services are those that we believe will grow at a faster pace, while some of the content creation capability of generative AI will subside, will get offset due to its moderation capability. Net, we still believe that the impact of generative AI on trust and safety is going to be positive. Just that the basket of services for which we are seeing outsourcing right now might slightly look different a couple of years ago. David, Abhi, I'll call upon you guys to also share some wisdom on how do you see the impact of generative AI in trust and safety.
Yeah, thanks, Dhruv. Yeah, so basically, I think it goes back to what we mentioned earlier, that the net impact is positive, right, on the trust and safety spend. And as Dhruv mentioned, that the mix of services might look a bit different, but also it's quite logical given the fact that a lot of the services which you see over here in terms of the AI support services are to do with helping enterprises guardrail the AI as they use AI for especially customer facing applications, right? A lot of the AI obviously is being used for internal enterprise applications as well, but trust and safety becomes paramount, when you're especially building anything which is customer facing. And as a lot of these enterprises, utilize these either the foundational models to build these applications, or even on the foundational model side, as they try to train those models, they will need to guardrail these AI models to make sure that they're compliant with their own AI principles, as well as be compliant with the regulations that will come into being in the future, right? So yeah, all of that is going to drive trust and safety spend. But on the human content moderation side, as enterprises try to automate as much of the moderation as possible internally, we don't expect the spend to increase in human content moderation significantly in the future.
Yeah, I have nothing else to add, Drew. Let's move on, because I'm sure people are really keen to get to the thrilling topic of regulation. But I know we've got one more slide to cover around sustainability first. So why don't we move on, and then we can keep moving forward.
Sure. Thanks, Abhi, for those views. Moving to responsible and sustainable AI, I think we've got this theme, and this theme has sort of picked up pace recently quite well. We've seen leading stakeholders at big tech enterprise come forward and talk about the need for utilizing AI, but also ensuring that the impact of AI is net positive overall, right? When we talk about AI, while AI comes with multitude of advantages, there are also concerns with lack of transparency, discrimination, threat to privacy, and so on. So some of the key elements that we see for responsible AI are, utilizing diverse training data set, or, providing greater visibility into how the automated moderation engines work, or having adherence to ethical values of privacy and safety. Areas where we feel that enterprises will require support in terms of responsible AI will include helping them build ethical and responsible AI frameworks, conducting risk assessments, regularly monitoring AI performance, or using a human in the loop approach. So these are some of the areas where we believe responsible AI represents an opportunity. Moving to sustainable AI, I think now compared to the past, there's greater awareness with increasing adoption of AI regarding the sort of impact that AI also has on the environment. So, for example, if I were to give you an example, a GPU uses 4 times more energy than a cloud application. There's substantial computing resources involved as well. So in terms of sustainable AI, some of the key elements that are out there are, using energy friendly architecture, storing data in alternate forms of energy, increasing focus on energy efficiency, responsible recycling. Some of the ways that we've seen enterprises deal with sustainable AI are ensuring that they're right sizing models, they are prioritizing use cases, reusing existing models, and avoiding model overtraining. So these were some of the evolving trends that we wanted to cover. And as David said, we'll cover regulations as we go ahead. Over to you,
Brilliant.
David.
Thanks, Drew. Yeah, and I just one point on that. I mean, I think obviously a lot of the time people focus on the technology, but underestimate the impact on ESG strategies that we know is also important for a number of enterprises out there. So actually being able to bring these two things together and think about how is the use of technology going to help the ESG agenda, but also potentially impact negatively the ESG agenda and what actions you have to take. So that was really interesting. So thank you, Drew. So just moving on now, we wanted to touch on as I said, rather flippantly, the exciting topic of regulations. And it might not be something that fills everybody with mass excitement, but it is really important from a business perspective to make sure you understand the regulations. And so firstly, just wanted to go to a quick poll, which is say, how do you think regulations will affect trust and safety? And there's a number of options there. So I'd appreciate if you could just take 30 seconds to give us some response. So how do you think that regulations will impact trust and safety? Do you think it will affect policies but not products and services? Do you think it will affect policies and products but not operations? Or will it affect all three? More humans, less AI, fewer humans, more AI, or more humans, more AI. So be interesting to just get your perspective. Again, appreciate if people could just take a couple of seconds just to give us your view. There's no right or wrong answer. This is your perspective on where you think it's going to go. We'll keep the poll open for another 30 seconds or so. But it does feel like people think it is going to affect all three right now. I'm not going to try and guide the answers. But again, if you could keep it maybe 10, 15 seconds, anyone else wants to have a say? What it's looking like is people think it will have an effect on all three, and it's product and trust and safety operations. More humans, more AI seems to be the winning answer. So if we could end the poll and maybe share the answers. So what we've seen is that 56% of the people who responded say regulations will affect all three: policy, product, and trust and safety operations. And actually it'll be more humans, more AI, which is an interesting perspective. So thank you for that. So if we think about moving forward to where we are, sorry, my machine has just decided to stop. Thank you. So if we think about that, Abby, maybe give us a view in terms of regulations. And as you know this, but let's not go into detail on every single one. There's a lot of content here for the audience,
right?
But maybe pick some of the highlights for people.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to talk about individual regulations, right? I think folks who are participating in this webinar over here probably know much more than me in terms of what are the features of each individual regulation. But what I would want to call out is the fact that we see a lot of people seem to agree with the fact that the impact of regulation will be more humans and more AI, and that it is going to affect product, policies, and operations, all three. And we also believe the same. In fact, I had attended one of the webinars and in fact a seminar as well on the Online Safety Act. And what we realized is that there are multiple recommendations, in fact, in terms of usage of technology as well. So the regulations that have come up in different parts of the world do recognize the fact that we live in the age of technology and AI. So basically, the regulations also have to take into account that there will be an impact of AI, and cannot simply say that, hey, remove all technology, will do it through humans, because that's A, humanly not possible, and B, that's kind of going backwards, right? So yeah, what we suspect is that as content keeps growing, both AI and human have a critical role to play, in terms of scalability and accuracy and speed. So which is why we believe there will be more humans and more AI. However, what's been changing in terms of the impact of regulations is that there are now trust and safety regulations, but there will also be AI regulations, which we'll talk about in a minute, which will come up. But in terms of the existing trust and safety regulations, and as we see more and more regulations come up in different parts of the world, what they are going to impact, especially the policies. Enterprises need to make sure that those policies that they are incorporating are robust, and that they are applied uniformly in similar situations. Because what we are seeing in several cases is that users are questioning whether a policy has been applied uniformly in a similar situation or not. The second is in terms of the product. So a lot of enterprises are now trying to incorporate, what we call trust and safety by design into a product. The idea behind that is that, hey, can we try to prevent the harm before it occurs, rather than trying to catch the harm after it has occurred, right, and then take remedial action. So a lot of the thinking is going into that product design, and we believe that as we move forward, we'll see more and more such features. We are seeing the social media and dating apps especially to be at the forefront of such kind of product design and product thinking. So that's a very, very good sign. And the third thing, obviously, in terms of operations, it's not only about how regulations are going to impact trust and safety, but it's also about how you're going to operationalize your compliance with regulations, right? So in terms of what is it that you need to change to your existing trust and safety operations, whether it's in terms of whether you do it internally, whether you partner with a service provider, whether you do it any other way, the regulations might affect what is allowed versus what is it something that you need to probably upgrade, right? Now that can be in terms of your data, your databases, that can be in terms of your product design, that can be in terms of how you partner up with service providers. So all of that in terms of operations is going to be roundly affected by these regulations in trust and safety. And if we move on to the next slide, we've spoken a bit about the upcoming AI Act as well. Now that is obviously in EU, but in other countries as well, like Australia with its AI ethics framework, and the UK is also, developing some kind of outcome-based framework for regulating AI. But the important thing over here is that there is going to be an intersection between the existing trust and safety regulations and the AI regulations. So in terms of generative AI having an impact on trust and safety, so it is not only going to be in terms of being compliant with the AI laws, but also being compliant with the trust and safety laws. So which is where the the enterprise need around guardrailing their AI while they're building customer facing applications becomes doubly important, right? So yeah, that's our 2 cents on regulations. So obviously, the regulations in different countries will differ a bit from each other, but the bottom line we believe is going to be quite fundamental, that enterprises essentially need to ensure that they moderate quickly, but also accurately, right? So that the safety of the users is paramount. Okay, so if we can move on, I think. David, do you want to take us through this? Or I mean, I can talk about this as well regarding the transparency of regulations. Probably want to touch upon that a bit.
Yeah, so I think I was just going to touch, and feel free to jump on in terms of some of the key themes that enterprises are having to think about, which I think sort of links back to what you were just saying. But I think when you look at it from an enterprise perspective, then they're having to think about, okay, how are we going to undertake a risk assessment? How are we going to think about the regulations that are coming? And as you said, it's really tricky from an enterprise perspective because you're working in lots of different markets with different regulations. You have to be thinking about specifically from a trust and safety perspective. You also have to think about grievance redressal. So how are you actually going to deal with grievances and complaints in different markets? How are you going to be thinking about reporting and transparency of what you're doing in trust and safety, leveraging generative AI, there's a lots of regulations again in different countries where you have to demonstrate where you've used AI to come to answers and how you're going to be able to do that tracking. So there's a whole host of themes that enterprises have to be thinking about. And obviously then on the right-hand side of this slide, we talk about the implications to providers. So as you're thinking about serving this market, then you have to think about how you're going to help companies and enterprises to address some of these issues and operationalize them as well to make sure that it's seamless. Because if it becomes too piecemeal or too onerous, then actually that's where mistakes get made and it exposes enterprises to all sorts of regulatory impacts and fines. So, but Abby, I know you probably know this area so much so much better than I do. So I don't know if you want to add anything to this slide in terms of other areas that we know enterprises have to be focusing on.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add, David, is that, the increased requirement for transparency. But I think even beyond the regulations, if you think about it, I think increased transparency in a way is very, very beneficial, because not only does it help about, ensuring trust, right? It increases the trust that an user has on a platform, because that user knows what are the kind of policies and the technology that an enterprise is using for trust and safety. But in the long run, it also helps enterprises understand user behavior better, because a part of the transparency is also about empowering users with knowledge. So, empowering parents in terms of, okay, what are the kind of harms your child might face, right, online. So I think it's a kind of a win-win situation. And given that now regulations have an increased, have mandated an increased focus on transparency, I think that's a very, very positive step in the long run.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, transparency is key to this moving forward to make sure that both sides are understanding what's happening. So, no, that's great. So we're going to move on now. But what I wanted to do is also put out there for the enterprise and for the enterprise audience there today is an offer in terms of having the opportunity to speak to our team. You haven't just got Drew, myself, and Abby in the Everest Group team focusing on trust and safety. We've got a whole team who look at this area. And so if you'd be interested in having a conversation with us in terms of what we're seeing in the trust and safety space, maybe deep dive into what we're seeing in terms of the impact on the market or the regulatory compliance, then we're happy to do a 30-minute call with someone so we can share some of our insights beyond the reports that we have available. So I think the team have just put a link in the chat. So if you are interested in having a follow-on conversation with us, then please press the link in the chat and then we can follow up and we'll get a 30-minute session in the diary. It's not a sales pitch from us. It's more about having that engagement, sharing some of our insights to make sure that we're educating the market, because that's our number one goal, is to provide you with insights to make the right decisions. So if you're interested in having a 30-minute conversation with the team, then please press on that link. So that will be in there. So as we move on to the last section of today, and I would encourage you also, if you've got any questions, we've got one question in the Q&A already, which we will get to at the end, if time permits, and I think we will have some time. If you've got any other questions you want to address today, then please put them in the Q&A and we'll get back to them live today if we can. If not, we'll follow up afterwards. But we move into the last section and really wanted to think about, okay, how will technology affect trust and safety services in the next 2 to 3 years? And I think that when we think about the enterprises and how they're facing challenges, we know that obviously we've talked about they're going to be rising content volume. The moderation of toxic content generated by AI applications is actually increasing. And then obviously the regulatory pressure. So we know that new formats such as short form video is actually on the rise. That is causing additional pressures on enterprises. We touched on earlier, the consistency and transparency is going to be needed. So these are all pressures that are going to be put on the enterprises. We know that actually there's more toxic content being generated, and actually then enterprises are going to be under severe pressure to comply with the regulation. So I think this is just a restatement of what we were saying, but these are the challenges that enterprises are having to face. And when we think about, okay, how should an enterprise be trying to address these challenges? We really would recommend, and when we talk to enterprises, and Drew and Abby, I'll look for you to maybe add if you've got any other perspective on this, but we recommend sort of a three-pronged approach to this, which is to incorporate safety by design. So really think about, you're designing your services, how do you build these safety nets in? How do you deploy Gen AI guardrail services to make sure that you actually got the right controls in place if you are leveraging generative AI? And then we say partner with third-party providers, and that's not because we're pushing outsourcing and saying that outsourcing to providers is the thing you must do, But what we do see is actually that a lot of the time, by partnering with third-party providers, they bring that expertise that sometimes it's hard for an enterprise to have on their own, because that's not core business for an enterprise. Third-party providers often have been doing this for many years, have developed a lot of the industry standards, and so they can do these type of things quicker with less hassle at lower cost because they're bringing the expertise. But Abby, Dhruv, I'd be keen to get your input on these areas as well, just to make sure that we're giving the audience a clear picture.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think I don't have anything to add in terms of anything else that enterprises need to do, because we will be discussing this in detail. But one thing that I'd want to call out is, this three-pronged approach that we are talking about kind of links back to the impact that we were saying that any regulation has on the enterprises. So in terms of your trust and safety operations as well, or your trust and safety, how you go about it, you always need to think about how you can improve your product, your policy, and your operations, right? So all this three link back to that. So as we go through each of this, we'll see that how it's a very holistic approach to improve your trust and safety services.
Brilliant. So Dhruv, I know you're going to cover safety by design in a bit more detail, so why don't we move on to that now and share what our thinking is in this space?
Yeah, sure. So just to give you an overview, right? Safety by design is an approach that puts user safety, user rights at the center of product design and development. The aim with safety by design is to build features that keep user safety in mind. You anticipate different types of threats might be out there. You eliminate them before they occur. So that is the basic crux of safety by design. Essentially, if we look at it, there are three broad pillars. There is platform responsibility, which is nothing but what is the responsibility that an enterprise has. There is user empowerment and autonomy. There's transparency and accountability. So what platform responsibility essentially talks about is that the burden of safety should not fall solely upon the user. While user has some role to play in it, the enterprise should also be more proactive. It should identify what are the potential ways where their application could misfunction, where somebody could misuse. They should anticipate that and be more proactive, and then take into account and get in more features such that the exposure that any particular user might have that gets reduced. So some of the ways platform responsibility could be incorporated is having specific teams for policy creation, having specific teams for policy implementation, sort of marketing your community guidelines so that each and every user is aware of those community guidelines, having infrastructure that allows for escalation when cases of user safety is involved, having protocols when there is engagement with law enforcement. When we talk about user empowerment and autonomy, the central theme of user empowerment and autonomy is dignity of users. So what this particular principle talks about is that products and services should align with the best interest of users. They the focus here is that enterprise should design features, enterprise should have those functions that preserve the fundamental rights, that preserve the human rights that any particular user might have. So essentially what this principle talks about is that users should have access to tools that allow them to manage their own safety in cases that is needed. Users should also have access to technical features that would allow them to identify, mitigate risks and harms. There should be built-in support functions. There should be feedback loop for users. Lastly, I think last thing that we've referred to, and we're going to talk about certain examples in the next slide as well, is around transparency and accountability. So if we look at it, transparency and accountability are hallmarks of a robust approach. They provide assurances that enterprises are taking direct steps towards ensuring that users on their platforms are safe. They not only educate users as to what enterprises are doing, they also empower users as to what are the different type of steps that users can take on their particular platform. Other than that, with transparency, with accountability, we identify what are some of the best practices, what are the efficacy of the safety features, what is actually working with some of the enterprises, and the other enterprises could also take a leap from that and have it in their own applications. So what we've done on the next slide, as you can see, is that we've highlighted some cases where safety by design as a principle has worked. So last month, for example, we saw some of the leading organizations, especially in the AI space, come together and agree upon the safety by design principles for AI generated CSAM. While CSAM has always been a big problem for the trust and safety services in general, with AI complicating things further, this was one of the partnerships that we saw last month. Other than that, Match Group, I think Abhi referred how dating apps are incorporating safety by design into their applications. Match Group, the parent organization of Tinder, Hinge, OkCupid, applications, what they have particularly done well is incorporate safety by designs in their applications. So, for example, if I were to talk about, they have a safety center in their own applications where users could go and access to resources, articles, tips. Then there's a feature known as "Are you sure?" So if somebody is sending a profane message, what they will do is actually give a reminder to that user and ask them if they are sure if they want to send that message. There's automatic scan of profiles whenever there's a red flag, whenever there's a red flag in the language, red flag in any image that they might have uploaded. And then there is regular scan for any sort of fraud that might be going on. So this is one of the very prominent ways that we are seeing enterprises also tackle different challenges that they are facing on their platform, and we anticipate that safety by design is going to be a big thing going ahead. When I talk about the second way in which we believe technology is going to affect trust and safety, here what we believe is that with leading enterprises, when we move beyond those leading enterprises as well, we've seen that a lot of non-digital first, along with the digital first applications, are using customer facing applications, powering them by GenAI. Now, GenAI represents an advantage. However, having said that, GenAI also comes with its own risks. There is a need to ensure that there is a responsible, there's a safe deployment of any customer facing application so as to avoid any PR disaster. And hence, what we believe are that these guardrail services that are out there, enterprises will require support on any customer facing application that is getting built throughout the LLM ops life cycle, be it helping them identify what are the different areas where they can apply generative AI, helping them prioritize what are those use cases, helping them calculate those ROI on those particular use cases. Then we know that data forms the backbone of generative AI, right? Helping them source data, annotate data, filter, process. So all these areas we believe are going to become important as we move ahead in the LLM ops life cycle. Once we've moved from the data life cycle and then we move to customizing the foundation model to a specific downstream task, enterprises require support, especially the non-digital ones, on services such as RLHF, fine-tuning, prompt efficient tuning, adversarial testing, red teaming. And once any particular application has been deployed, they require a continuous monitoring and a feedback support. So these are the guardrailing services that we anticipate are going to become important. Abhi, David, I'd like you to pitch in and share your wisdom into this area.
So what I would say is that especially the model inference and monitoring, right? A lot of this actually goes back to the sustainability and responsible AI that we spoke about, because realize that the principles of sustainable and responsible AI state that it's not only about adopting the most efficient generative AI model, but it's also about checking, as you go along, how efficient that model and how green that model still is, right? So, monitoring those models especially gives you that kind of an insight, okay, into whether do you need to change the model? Are you finding the right balance between the efficiency and, the sustainability, right? So that's one. The other thing is that if you look at safety by design and the guardrailing generative AI, all of this essentially kind of hark back to an age-old adage, right? That prevention is better than cure. So a lot of the trust and safety stuff that enterprises are trying to do is especially about ensuring that users have an enhanced digital experience by preventing the harm from occurring rather than trying to mitigate it as much as possible. Right.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to this is what I find quite interesting about this as we think about the future is that we would encourage service providers of these services to be thinking about, okay, what's our roadmap for the future? How are we going to be able to offer these services? Where's the right talent to be able to address some of these services as well. And so it's interesting that enterprises are going to be needing these skills. Service providers who are forward thinking should be thinking, okay, well, how do we get those skills in our model? Have we already got them? Where are we going to get them from? And also, does our strategy align to where the customer's going to be? We're doing a lot of work right now with customers in terms of trying to understand, okay, where's the buyer going to be and where are the provider base going to be? And we're looking at that across a number of areas, because where we are today is not where we're going to be in a few years. So trying to get ahead of that and being able to provide these services with the right skills and the right talent is going to be fundamental for success in this model moving forward as well. So yeah, just a thought in terms of thinking about the future.
Yeah. I second your thoughts, David. I second your thoughts, Abhi. And I'll quickly move on to the last method that we had suggested. And I think the third way we believe that technology is going to affect trust and safety is the role that technology providers are going to play. So what we've been seeing is that recently the role of technology providers is increasing. While a couple of months ago, there was the funding winter and a lot of these technology vendors were not proactive. Having said that, what we've seen over the past few months is that these technology vendors have gone ahead and helped enterprise, build in solutions for, suppose, AI generated content classifier, helping them with output filtering, threat landscaping, then services such as age verification, copyright search, detection of deepfakes. What technology vendors are doing very right is the fact that they are identifying niche problems and building solutions to them. So while the big tech might not be very open to outsourcing for technology, having said that, they've identified that there are certain niche areas where they have expertise, and where their knowledge is, where their technology is actually superior, and they've used that capability and also gone ahead and partnered with a lot of VPS providers. So that is it from my side. Over to you, David.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. Appreciate it. So wanted to go to questions. So we've got a few minutes, and so we've got time for questions. So Abhi, I know that you wanted to address this one, so I'm going to put this straight to you. So question came in from Venkat, which was around, in the broader context, sustainable AI requires AI to be hosted using clean and green tech, renewable energy, and zero emissions. What's our view on that? And so I think this is a much bigger topic, but I think we can cover a little bit of it here. We do a lot of work around sustainable AI and sustainable IT even at Everest Group, but we can probably cover it here, and we can always follow up with more detail later. But what's your thinking?
Yeah, I think the major direction in which a lot of efforts has been put in terms of sustainable AI and responsible AI is trying to minimize the computational cost of generative AI models, right? So trying to use more efficient algorithms, architecture, hardware, whatnot. I mean, one of the ways in terms of hardware has been trying to shift AI operations to energy efficient data centers within cloud computing. But I mean, these are obviously very early days, but has been a lot of progress. So for example, beyond the large language models, now there is an increasing number of what we call as small language models, right? Like the one that was released by Snowflake a few weeks back. So which do not use as many number of parameters as large language models. So which leads to, obviously more energy efficiency. The other way that what we are seeing in terms of the infrastructure is that there has been an increased focus on hydrogen fuel cells, right? So they are supposed to provide a much more efficient and reliable energy source. But beyond all of this, what I would also want to highlight is there has been increased government focus on using AI to, for efficiency, in the sense that in trying to cut emissions, right? So for example, the UK government had spent around, I think, more than $1 million now on innovative green tech, right, to help UK's clean energy transition. And in fact, UK is probably right now the first major economy to be able to halve its emissions since 1990. So yeah, I mean, so there are multiple things that are going on in terms of sustainable AI. One is in terms of, okay, how do we make AI more sustainable, but also in terms of, okay, can we use AI for a more sustainable future in general, right? But like David mentioned, we're doing a lot of research in terms of sustainable AI and responsible AI. So yeah, please do come talk to us if you want to know about that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Abhi. So I don't see any more questions. So just leaving you with, there's a lot of content out there, everestgroup.com. We do a lot of coverage in this space. So just some examples of some of the reports that we've got out there. So you will get a copy of the slides. You've got the ability to ask us questions. So I'd like to give everyone maybe 4 minutes back in their day, get time for a cup of tea, coffee, adult beverage, as the Americans would say, depending on what time of day it is in the world where you are. But thank you very much for your time today. And we look forward to speaking to you again soon. So thank you very much.